I was always interested in continuing to build, to create. So I built the company that I want to work in. A company that's focused on helping the world get the best out of blockchain.
Many people here believe that this new wave of technologies can actually help, like bringing a technological backstop to the power accumulation that we're seeing in services like Facebook and Google. And now for the first time we can use tech to actually address social problems in a much more fundamental way. Like not just applying math to do statistics, but like applying math to help that we don't have to put so much trust in services online.
We have, I think, the best team in the ecosystem. So we don't use other people's technology, we create our own. And much of what we do is, if not strictly research, it's certainly substantial innovation. So we take research grade material and we turn ideas into products.
What I'm trying to do is to make Polkadot work in theory as well as practice. And our job is to make sure that the protocols are actually secure and scalable. So blockchain, it's kind of an adversarial environment. You can have something, you can deploy it, it can work in practice, and then someone can find something which completely breaks it. Then we kind of know that this block could be finalized. Mm-hmm. So you think of all the possibilities, you come up with one that works, you discuss it with other researchers, we try and poke holes or think of new ideas to improve it. Once we think we've got something good, we'll start talking to developers. And every now and again, us and various people from Parity will have some sort of retreat, and we'll get around to Blackboard and discuss all the open problems in Polkadot.
I was a cryptocurrency hobbyist for a few years. I was pretty big into Bitcoin. I heard some stuff about Ethereum. I was also programming in a language called Rust. So when I saw that there was a company called Parity, which is working on cryptocurrency in Rust, it kind of hit the sweet spot for me. So I packed a suitcase and I haven't really been back much since.
They certify the parachain statements at the private block, but it's not really finality.
But we need the real finality.
We have finality when something exits the fisherman period, or once it's gone through both.
It's been crazy, but it's been great. The team is some really bright people, and I'm learning things about mathematics or about consensus that I never really would have considered before. I think it's pretty good that we're applying it in a way that's not purely academic, that actually seems to be something that can enact change in the world around us.
We want to build decentralized applications that will provide great user experience and functionality. In this new space, we have a lot of things are already being built, so there is a lot of components out there, but they're all very, very disjointed.
So many teams are working in separation, so rather than building on top of each other's technology, they kind of reinvent every time the whole stack from scratch. There has been a lot of focus on just the protocols without thinking how they will be used in the end by the end users.
In order to better coordinate ourselves, we need some sort of framework that will allow us to better see how they fit together.
We built not only Polkadot, the Polkadot blockchain, but we also built a good blockchain framework for creating new blockchains. And in my mind, Substrate was always really key for Polkadot being successful. Polkadot, you might think of it as like a token or a blockchain, but actually what's very important is that Polkadot as an ecosystem has a really good, at least one really good framework for building new blockchains. Because Polkadot's only going to be successful if it's got a lot of successful blockchains working within it.
I joined Parity right about the time of Web3 Summit last year. I hadn't moved to Berlin yet, but I was watching on my computer in California, and I watched Gav's presentation on a rustic vision for Polkadot.
We can construct the runtime. We just basically list all of these modules here.
It was during this talk that he described that Polkadot is his biggest bet against blockchain maximalism towards a vision of a multi-chain future. Substrate provides you with all of the core components you need to build a blockchain. Things like a database, networking, a transaction queue, consensus engine, and even a library of runtime modules.
And the runtime is the thing that actually describes what the transactions do, how the blockchain...
So the runtime, technically speaking, is the state transition function of that blockchain. It means that it defines the rules that are legal, basically, from one block transitioning to the next block. So like how the state can literally transition. But kind of more practically speaking, it's the brains of the blockchain. It's basically a bunch of applications and utilities and things that it knows how to do.
What's so exciting about this platform is that you can go ahead and design your own runtime modules. And we actually envision that this module library might become like a larger app ecosystem, where there'll be developers building all these open source runtime modules, and you as a blockchain developer can just pick and choose the different functionality and logic that you want to add to your blockchain and just put it in there and launch your chain. I'll give you an example here. There's this balances module. Balances module basically describes the functionality of a cryptocurrency on this blockchain. If you want to build a smart contract platform, you would just need to add the contracts module. And so really what I'm trying to tell you is that it's never been easier than today to be able to build a blockchain. With Substrate, you can literally build a blockchain in minutes.
Substrate is powered by WebAssembly in terms of how the logic of the blockchain is encoded. And that's actually how Polkadot's logic of parachains is encoded. So it could serve as a very useful launching off point for parachains to be added to the Polkadot network. And that's huge for us because a lot of parachain developers are specialists in specific fields like machine learning. So providing something like Substrate where they could just get going and start hacking on their machine learning or data science specific expertise was massively helpful.
So what Substrate gives us is this little toolbox. So it doesn't matter if you are the relay chain, like Kusama or Polkadot, or if you are a parachain that's connecting to these relay chains, or if you are your own chain running somewhere on your own. If you want to make changes or add modules or add features, you can go through an upgrade process as long as you get go for governance, which in your case might be council, a technical committee, and a democracy, like we've got in Kusama and Polkadot. Some chains have only got technical committees. Some chains might decide to have a god-like pseudo power, but through these mechanisms, you can actually schedule upgrades.
Polkadot evolved over time as initially an idea of like how to make it scalable and then how to make it easier to develop for developers. A bunch of the principles that Gav laid out in the Polkadot paper, and then basically what we learned along the way, in particular around the governance. The DAO was a pretty decisive moment, like for everybody. Like until then, there always was this tenet of like code is law. First of all, like anything that's written on a blockchain should like never be questioned, and how you deal with controversy in the ecosystem was one of the key things that led us to believe there is a need for governance, because hard fork just means the splitting of communities, and that can't be the answer to controversy. Like you need to bring people together, and this is how you do this, by establishing an explicit way of doing governance.
It's really exciting. Software gets built, features gets added, it gets audited. Somebody in council proposes this upgrade, goes through the council process, goes through the democracy process, and now it sounds like work, but it's actually magic that sits behind it. The fact that you can actually make these changes, and like all of a sudden, all around the world where these nodes are running, from the one block to the next, they're running different versions of the software. It's really cool.
So we're used these days to seamless upgrades when we have an app on our phones, like we just click a button, 3 seconds and it's done. But the user experience of a hard fork is something you can't sell to anyone if they're like reliant on an application. And so also from that perspective, like governance is to us like the answer of how to deal with the problem of software obsolescence and upgrading.
So in Polkadot, we care about bridges. We care about other blockchains, like, say, Ethereum, if we want to sort of communicate between them. And we have the trouble that they have different consensus systems. But because they're both capable of doing logic, what you want to do is say, can we prove to Ethereum that this is what's going on in Polkadot? So Grandpa, it's a finality gadget. It provides a mechanism to get something which is signed by 2/3 of validators, and if we can show that, then we can show that this is the thing that happened on Polkadot. So Grandpa is like a kind of Byzantine agreement thing. To finalize any block, it absolutely has to have 2/3 of people voting for it at some point. One of the things about working in something more the theory end before is I'd prove something and we'd write a paper and it would be amazing and no one would ever use it. So here I can come up with something new like Grandpa and prove it works, and then within a month Rob Powerbye came along and started coding it. And now it's in deployment, used by systems in the real world. It's not magic, it's maths and crazy cryptographic assumptions, but it works.
For the specification, we don't care about how databases have to. The context of blockchain is still one that is innovating. We're still very slowly climbing up the ladder of sort of comprehension as to how it's going to affect things and how business and enterprise and indeed the economy of the world will change around it. We can compare it to the days of the computer as the computer progressed through the 80s and the 90s. It was very difficult to keep things compatible from one computer to the next. It means that newcomers to it don't want to invest too much in the current generation because they knew that the next generation is just around the corner and it will massively devalue and undermine any of their investment in the current generation. We don't need to make that trade-off between innovation and adoption. With Polkadot, we can have both, because we can have parachains, these independent blockchains under Polkadot, and if we want to innovate, we can add new independent chains that can still interoperate with the older variants. It means that there's an upgrade path so that when the next generation, the latest and greatest, comes along, there's a way that you can move over to it, there's a way that you can use it. You're not stuck out in the cold on your previous generation.
Really, it's 1969 and we're trying to land on the moon here. There's this huge early technology, very, very difficult. Let's zoom out and look at the kind of the big picture. What do you think are the real advantages of decentralization?
We all, I mean, who of you has had their data stolen or leaked at some point?
Totally.
So, I mean, this is really, these issues will become much bigger, and what we hope to build is basically the infrastructure for having a much safer decentral web.
Gavin?
I think this is one of the reasons why Bitcoin actually sort of was a real zeitgeist, in that, you know, people felt, at least the technologically minded ones, but I think increasingly more sort of mainstream people are of the opinion that they don't need to trust the central bank or politicians or systems that are fairly obscure and opaque. They can actually use something that is more or less the same as the cash in their pocket or the notion of gold. That, I think, is part of the whole sort of notion of blockchain and crypto and what it's delivering. Decentralization is sort of a means of delivering it.
So it's going to be an interesting 5 or 10 years.
I'm very excited about what Gav is working on. I've known Gav for a long time, and I think he's just one of the great minds in the space.
If we head to the partner code base.
We are a diversified investment fund that invests exclusively in blockchain protocols. We manage $200 million, and we have backing from Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia Capital, Union Square Ventures, and the Founders Fund, among others.
I think that for the first time, there's enough users broadly in the cryptocurrency space to start making smart contract-based businesses viable. I think we're going to see more and more decentralized corporate structures where capital can be coordinated from all around the world using blockchains. And that whole new kind of financial system is all totally interoperable, permissionless, and extensible.
Once we get to scalable systems that can handle the kind of traffic that you might see on a service like Facebook, then we can start building those user-facing applications and financial services that actually are very useful for the average person.
The reason that I'm so interested in cryptocurrency as an investor is that, to me, a lot of the work here is bootstrapping monetary systems from zero in a totally open source way, where it's opt-in and interoperable and permissionless, so anyone can build anything they'd like. To me, if it plays out the way I think many of us in this room think it will, it's likely to be the greatest investment opportunity humanity will see in this era, definitely in my lifetime.
There are maybe something like 15 million users of, say, Bitcoin. If you start a new blockchain in the pre-Polkadot world, you have to get those users to opt into your new blockchain in order to gain that functionality. In the post-Polkadot world, what will be possible is for that blockchain to immediately tap into that user base of an existing blockchain. This just means that new ideas can scale much, much faster. It almost facilitates a sort of exponential growth curve.
The ecosystem is developing really nicely. We got 250 projects underway, 100 teams building chains and substrate, and about half of those are trying to get a parachain slot. The idea of Polkadot is one that facilitates other projects, other teams, other chains to do as much that they can as possible without Polkadot getting in the way. Operating independently but able to communicate with each other. Celebrating the fact that there are many chains rather than trying to force everything in under one chain and one economy. I think that's probably the most powerful bit of ethos that Polkadot has.